Welcome back. This is still TV3Newday. It's time now for the big issue. And in fact, a major global concern has been raging on since yesterday. In fact, something that has been of major concern for everyone for the longest time, at least since 2014. Now, yesterday, Russia launched an attack on Ukraine, its neighbor. And it has to do with a number of things. I mean, if you go into the history, you realize that, Ukraine had signed on to an agreement, a trade agreement with NATO and with EU, and Russia has not been in favor of it, of course, if you check the history of the Soviet Union and the fact that Russia believes that if the Western world and Europe get closer and form allies with Ukraine, then that means that it will cause a security threat to the Russian nation. And Vladimir Putin, who is the president of that nation, has always expressed concern about that. But the worrying thing is that over time, when he was asked if he was planning an invasion, he said no. When his ambassadors were asked, they constantly said no. And yesterday, there was an attack. And this is having rippling effects on not just the citizens within Ukraine, but even other countries, and in fact, Africa, because Brent crude oil prices have gone up by $105 per barrel. And this is the highest since 2014, so since 7 years now. And that is also something that a lot are worried about because fuel prices could increase. Already we're even reeling under the effect of high prices in the country. So what does it really mean, especially for Africa? We'll look at the impact on security as we move along, because we know Russia also has ties with some African countries, and recently even with Nigeria they signed some agreements. So should we be worried about that? What about the students, the Ghanaian students who live in Russia? How are we going to evict them from the country to safety? Joining me this morning, and we'll have three guests, I'm sure, before the end of the show. But this morning I have Michael Kwadwo Nketia. He's an international relations analyst, and he's here to tell us all about it and maybe what we should be looking out for. Good morning.
Good morning.
I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing well.
Okay. First of all, I want us to just go a bit into the history because a lot of people have been asking, why should we even be concerned about what's happening between Russia and Ukraine? But also it's of major concern because of the effects that it will have on us. Let's go back to the history of how all this came about and why Russia is invading Ukraine.
Well, historically, after the end of the World War II, America and NATO, or its Western allies, and the Soviet Union, which was led by Russia, became the two major dominant powers that determined how the world should be ruled and governed based on their victory in the Second World War against Nazi Germany. Now, after the war, the Soviet Union had a coalition of about 16 states that constituted the Soviet Union. And Russia led these states till the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Vladimir Putin is a very, very tactful man. He believes that the post-Cold War security architecture of the world did not favor the Russians. And he has this empire-building ambitions to restore Russia to its decades-old glory, which was taken away from it by the United States. But the bigger point that Russia and Putin is missing is that this is the 21st century. Countries are independent sovereign states, and you don't impose your will on country by mere might of your military strength or your economic might. And perceiving that line of trajectory is very dangerous for global peace and security. Why? America in its own can stand up to Russia on any day militarily. Economically, they are far superior. The economy of even California is far bigger than that of Russia. I don't see the end game that President Vladimir Putin is targeting, but the path he is pursuing is very dangerous.
How is it dangerous? It looks like the world is even scared of him because he threatened that any country that tries to challenge what he's doing at the moment will face far greater consequences than they have ever seen, in the history of the world.
One thing we should not take from the West and the Americans is that consistently for the past 14 days, President Joe Biden predicted, and the American intelligence was perfect, that Russia and Putin was going to invade Ukraine. True to their prediction, it came to pass. One, the American knew Russia was going to invade. One may ask, why did they not intervene?
Exactly.
First, Ukraine is not a member of NATO. The common security principle that governs NATO is that an attack on one is an attack on all. So if Poland is a member of NATO and Russia decides to invade Poland today, America and the West will have no other option than to mount up a serious military resistance to Russia. As we are speaking today, there are American commandos in Poland. Great Britain even sent weapons to Ukraine, and other allies, Germany, France, they are all ready to send troops to defend any member country of NATO that President Vladimir Putin may decide to invade further. The strategy that President Putin is using is not new. If you followed the international political arena, you should know that in 2008 he went on a similar warpath with Georgia.
Yeah.
In 2014 he went to the Crimea region of Ukraine. He has a strategy of not going out full scale. Why? He's testing the resolve of America and its Western allies. One thing people don't know, people think Putin, of course, has been incentivized by America's failure to critically punish it when it invaded Crimea in 2014, which I believe. But one thing people are not taking care of is that after the 2014 invasion of Crimea, President Obama enacted a lot of economic sanctions against Russia, and it nearly crippled the Russian economy.
But they recovered after 2 years.
Just because of one thing, crude oil, its dominance on natural resources, which is crude, natural gas, and oil. Germany is the biggest economy in Europe. Russia alone accounts for 40% of its natural gas and nearly 15% of its crude oil resources. Now, if you go to the whole of Europe, they depend so much on Russian oil and gas to power their homes, cooking, and even fuel for cars. So the strategy is, if Putin decides to go to war with Europe, Europe has many options. Number one, they can look at another source of supply for their energy needs. It may come at a cost, which may affect the whole world. And how fast and quick can America mobilize another source of crude for Europe so that they don't depend on Russia to economically harm the Russian economy and to mount up a serious resistance against President Putin and Russia? In 2015-16, when there was the Fukushima power plant disaster in Japan, they were dependent on the nuclear power source for energy production. In the space of 2 weeks, America was able to provide an alternative source of energy to the Japanese and restored the disruption that occurred to the global energy industry. So we have to look at all these dimensions and not forgetting the fact that till date, we haven't seen what is happening in Europe currently. Since the end of World War II, we haven't actually witnessed a sovereign country going out on a full-scale war against another sovereign country in Europe. And this is not just a sovereign country. As we speak today, Russia chairs the UN Security Council. Russia is a nuclear power. Russia has the economic might, it has the military might, the technological might to go on a full-scale war. But we shouldn't and we should never underrate the capability of America and its Western allies. It even goes beyond the Pacific. Australia is part, Canada is part, even South Korea. And these are very dangerous and interesting times. But what we should be looking out for is, what is Vladimir Putin's strategy? Is he on an ambition to restore the lost Soviet glory, or
well, that is what we're hearing that he wants to do. We've heard from the NATO General Secretary says that all he wants is just to restore Soviet Union. We've heard from the UK Prime Minister, same conversation they're all having as well. So that probably is his plan.
That is not a possibility. Currently, Russia has over $600 billion of foreign exchange reserves, which it accrues basically from its sale of oil and gas. And then if Russia decides to go on that empire restoration agenda, it is going to need more than 4 or 5 years to do that, because NATO and America will mount up a serious resistance, and the cost of war is not a joke. He needs money. He needs money,
yes, and the American government is looking at crippling that based on what President Joe Biden said yesterday. But even before we go into that conversation, we have joining us via phone is Professor Vladimir Antwi Danso. He's the Dean, Ghana Armed Forces Command and Staff College. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us on TV3Newday, and I hope you're doing well.
You're very welcome. I'm being well by the grace of God.
It must be very disturbing, I mean, finding out that Russia has invaded Ukraine, and of course the ripple effects that it would have on us as a continent. But for you, what are your initial thoughts on what is happening currently in Ukraine?
Well, I wasn't surprised so much, but I didn't think it would take this form of escalation. The point is that all along from 1997, I knew that the Russians were massing up strength in order to confront NATO. If you read and if you follow NATO-Russian relationship, you realize that after the fall of the Soviet Union and after the implosion of Russia, the Soviet Union, the Cold War ended, there was no point why NATO should continue to exist, because these were two, that the Warsaw Pact and NATO were two serious military organizations confronting each other. And so when one has lowered the barrier, there was no point the other existing. If you understand what is called realism in security, you would realize that anything you do, even in economic sense, is a threat to the other. And that is what brings about arms race, alliances, etc., etc. There was no need NATO trying to take almost all the former Soviet aligned states from Latvia, Lithuania, all the way to Georgia. And then if you watch out, in 2008, the Russians were very serious and warned NATO that you are crawling closer to my borders, and that's not correct. Now, in 2008, what has happened. In 2008, there were two enclaves in Georgia, South Ossetia and Nagorno-Karabakh, which are enclaves inside Georgia, who declared independence, and the Russians went in to support them. In fact, as we speak right now, Russian contingents are there under a so-called peacekeeping. That should have been a signal to NATO. Then the so-called annexation of Crimea should have sent a message. Then now you want Ukraine, which means the border with NATO would be Ukraine, maybe Belarus also, maybe Georgia. No country would allow that. And watch out, two American generals said, we would have done it. Bernie Sanders is saying, let us not be hypocritical about Russian interests. So these are the real issues. But I never thought Russia would go to that length of attacking the way they have. I thought the best they would do is to enter and under the guise of supporting the Russian-speaking enclaves, the gangs and Donetsk, to remain there and force Ukraine to abandon its project of joining NATO. I thought that would be. But now it looks as though very many high cities of Ukraine are being attacked, Kiev, Lvov, and other things. That is more a little worrying.
Now, the thing is that right after the Revolution of Dignity, we saw some sanctions that were imposed on Russia. And so the Russian ruble fell, by about 50% or so. It lost its value. It was that low. And even the prices of crude oil and all that. But they were able to recover, even though they went into a recession after 2 years. And so yesterday, President Joe Biden announced that there were going to be some severe sanctions meted out towards Russia. And it's not just him. We heard from the NATO General Secretary, we heard from the EU, and they're all singing the same song that we're going to issue some sanctions against them. But the big question that many people have been asking, you issued sanctions, and even those sanctions that you issued, after the Revolution of Dignity, it was extended up until July this year, and so it's still in force. But then that didn't stop Russia from invading Ukraine. What makes you think that if you're going to freeze all their assets and make it difficult for them to trade in pounds, in euros, in dollars and yen, that is going to make any difference? What do you say?
The point is that we need to rewrite the international relations order, because the Russians, you must watch systems. How many sanctions have not been imposed on Russia and or China, and they are surviving. And so people should know that the order we put down in 1945 is hiccuping very badly. The international order we put in 1945 is the United Nations, IMF, World Bank, and the ITU, which is now the WTO. And now America, unfortunately, from 1992 or even before that, from the implosion of the Soviet Union, has gradually put almost all international institutions under its ambit. They pander to the whims of the West, blah, 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 blah. And Russia and China have not been interested in this. To be honest, they wanted to change the international order, form the BRICS, give an international currency, etc., etc. So now we are in a turmoil we should be very careful about. The international order we know today is going to hiccup very badly, and Russia cannot be bothered. They are now resolved. if you watch out the speeches of Putin for the past 3 years, the State of the Nation's address, then he's going apocalyptic. We should be very careful. The alliance between China, Russia, now Pakistan, and North Korea, we should be very careful. They are very apocalyptic, and we should be very careful. And watch out. Anytime America misbehaves, nobody talks. They went to Iraq. Kofi Annan said, don't go. They went. Which sanctions were put on America? America went to Maurice Bishop's country, Grenada, in 1982, just because Grenada wants to be socialist. Just like Ukraine wants to join NATO. And America, the country of 10,000 people, America just went, killed the prime minister, and said, you cannot have socialism at our backyard. So these are some of the things that it looks as though the other side of the world, Russia, China, believes that, look, why can't somebody just misbehave and we look on? Why can't we misbehave? China is building the South China area and say nobody should come there. The ICJ found China guilty, but they said, what? Go to hell. So the international order itself is going to hiccup very, very, very badly. We need to be very careful.
But it is not Russia's position to determine which side Ukraine forms an ally with. Ukraine has that sovereignty to determine where they want to be. And in fact, even back in 2014, when there had been that move to even sign with NATO, it is said that Russia sort of invaded and tried to find a way to even convince the then president to sign on with them. So they promised them some $15 million and all of that because they were scared of the security threats that would come. And many heads of nations have said that you cannot decide for Ukraine where they want to belong. So if you're threatening us that if we even try to invade or we try to do something about this, you will also attack us in a way that we've never experienced before, that is wrong. What do you say?
No, the point is that every country has the right to, its sovereignty and what it wants to do. But then the international order. Why do we have a country like Kosovo today? Kosovo also, it's in the heart of Serbia. It's a Serbian land, de facto Serbian land, and they decided that we want to secede, we want to be part of NATO, whatever it is, whatever I want to be part of the West. America and NATO quickly surrounded the whole place. There was war, the Serbians were defeated, and Kosovo is now a country. Who said what? So you see, as I'm saying, where security is concerned, there is no ethics, there is no morality. Russia feels threatened if NATO takes Ukraine or Georgia and says, look, stop it. In any case, are we asking why NATO is continuing to exist? Are we asking that question? To defend whom against whom? So the question is, no matter what we say, Russia, China, any other country will defend itself and attack any other area which is close to its borders, and when they check their security horizon, it threatens them, they would do it. Even though morally it may be wrong.
All right.
So why is we question whether Ukraine has no right? They have the right. Iraq had the right. Libya had the right. So why were they attacked? That's why I'm saying the international order, the UN must set up. We all thought that from 1992 we were going to see some kind of peace. But America and the West made the mistake of thinking that they have won the Cold War. So they started grabbing, and this is where we are today. That is the crux of the matter.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for speaking to us this morning. I know you have to go back into a lecture hall, and so we cannot keep you on for so long. But we've been speaking to Professor Vladimir Entry-Dan. So he's the Dean of the Ghana Armed Forces Command and Staff College. In the studios, we still have Michael Kwejon-Ketia. He's an international relations analyst, and also Dr. Adam Bunai is a security analyst. He's also the CEO of Security Warehouse Limited. Good morning, Doc. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're well.
Yes.
Should we be worried about the security implications of what is happening in Russia? And I'm asking this with regards to how Russia has sort of found its way into many African countries as well. And as of September 2021, it was reported that they had signed an agreement even with Nigeria, with regards to these issues as well. Should we be worried? Which is what a lot of Ghanaians are asking, that if there's a war between Russia and Ukraine, how is that really our business? In any way, we've been threatened not to even involve ourselves. Otherwise, there would be some sanctions or, effects against us. So why should we be worried?
Yes. Good morning and good morning to your viewers. Sorry for coming in a bit late. The traffic out there a bit heavy. Yes, for me, I think we should be worried for what is going on around the Eastern Bloc. But for us as Africans, I must say that Russia and probably that part of the world have always been, they've always been here. If you know the genesis of most African countries, how they gained independence and the association to Russia and the rest, I would say we shouldn't be that worried.
Okay.
I would say we shouldn't be that worried, because then were we worried when America and the rest decided to take away Muammar Gaddafi? It was after the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi that the Sahel went into turmoil, because then Muammar Gaddafi was able to stop inflow of ammunitions and the rest through the Sahel to this part of the world. But unfortunately, they went in and AU, ECOWAS couldn't say anything. And so as far as I'm concerned, this particular war, between Ukraine or Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, you want to say, permanently would have changed the world order. Because then in the past it was more or less rhetorics. After the Second World War, it was more of the Cold War, where we have our feet or our fingers on a certain button that when we press, some nuclear weapon would be discharged and all that. But that never really happened. And so if you gauging from what sentiments on the ground in Ukraine, most Ukrainians are surprised that Russia actually has invaded. Most Ukrainians are surprised. So
even though it was predicted.
They were never prepared. They weren't expecting. You could see Joe Biden and the rest, because Joe Biden and co were talking to the Russian leaders, and they kind of kept on telling us and giving us up to date when they are likely to invade. And so, as far as I'm concerned, I was expecting probably this earlier than we have seen. And the reason is that America would have done the same. Britain would have done the same. And if you go, you realize that even France has not been interested in what is going on. Germany itself, after the call it the Second World War, decided to say we will not be going in to support any conflict of a sort.
But France has waded in, by the way, because their president is the first to have spoken to Vladimir Putin. It was announced yesterday that he spoke to him yesterday and asked him to end the invasion.
But end the invasion doesn't mean saying that we are going to be coming in to do anything. You notice how they went, all of them ganged up against Libya, ganged up in Iraq, ganged up in other countries. But you notice all of them are kind of taking that soft posture instead of probably. And America, for me, after the disgrace of America in Afghanistan, America would not want to move into, do anything. And you see
Are they scared because of the threats from Vladimir Putin? Because he says, if you try to challenge me, you'll face far greater consequences than you have ever imagined.
Well, you see, public opinion does a lot in the West. American public opinion in America doesn't support Americans, American boots in that area. Obviously, once they send them in, the body bags will start coming. People will start dying. The American economy is likely to suffer some amount of collateral damage. And so mine is that if you take all of these things into consideration, I don't see America, even though they would have what it takes to go in and try to fight Russia. You are going to fight another nuclear power. You have to gauge and see, do I have what it takes to be able to do the business? If you couldn't do it, clean up, what do you call it, Afghanistan, even in Mali, the Paris government is withdrawing their troops because even though they were there, they couldn't stop what happened in Mali. And so mine is that the world order is changed permanently. International relation aspects we have to begin to rewrite, the world order, because now it's moved from the Cold War era where rhetorics to invasion of Ukraine. And as far as I'm concerned, why would the West want to have that kind of basis around another superpower? Because they would have done the same. Just like you heard from Prof. Vladimir Chinanso said. Yes, they would have done worse. And we've seen them do worse. And no one spoke. Well, have you ever heard any country sanctioning America? Have you ever heard any country sanction America? The Falkland War, I don't know whether you heard about it. I'm not trying to justify the invasion of Russia. What I'm trying to say is that, you know, we have a certain, some countries who can move in. The Falkland Wars, the Falkland War involved Britain, isn't it? They went in there, did their business. No one challenged them. And so mine is that, why is it that when they decide to do some of these things, the world is not able to sanction them, but when others do it? And so probably some world order would have to be rewritten so that in the end, we cannot operate and believe that, you know, what you are doing is wrong. But at the moment, even though you look at it, the Ukrainians should have the freedom to live in their country. Russia shouldn't be invading, but others have done it. What happened to them? So it almost gives Russia that justification to say we are moving in. But for me, in Ghana, we should be worried about what is going on, the coups that are going on in the sub-region rather than probably. But of course, our economy is going to be hard hit. When I say our economy is going to be hard hit, you can see fuel prices are already going up, and we are all in one way or the other. We are talking about a very big country that supplies the bulk of the, you know, the world's oil, you know, and gas in the world. And so, you know, Bella, we've got to tread cautiously, and I think that I would wish this conflict would end, you know, as soon as possible. Already they've hit about 14 bases as at this morning. They've, you know, hit 14 bases, and I'm thinking that it should not extend to civilian populated areas. Already about 150 people have died, including some women and children, which is unfortunate. Any conflict, there's never been any winner after, you know, so we've got to be careful. Should
we be worried about our security? And I'm asking this because the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute estimated that Africa accounts for 18% of Russian armor exports, and that was between 2016 and 2020. And so a lot of their armory is coming into our town, and we've seen the threats, the coup threats, and even coups happening in some countries that are even close to Ghana as well. Should we be worried about that?
Well, we have to be worried, and we don't have to be worried. I say this because how much is even the West investing in this part of the world? China is a big nation. China is investing in the whole of Africa. And so the guy who has the bigger paycheck would have a say in your economy. And so as we say, China is donating a lot of goodies to Ghana, to, you know, call them Mali, to other countries in Africa. So it will be difficult. And Russia seems to be signing agreement with us. And so mine is that I don't see why we should be worried. We should be worried about how, you know, youth unemployment and all these things can be stopped, and coups and the rest. But in terms of getting worried about our security, yes, we should be worried. First of all, because then could this lead to, you know, already you can see we are told that if e-levy is not passed, already we cannot, you know, lecturers might not be able to. And so yes, in that manner, what it means is that if our economy gets worse than this, then you are going to have a lot of agitations. So you are going to have that kind of insecurity if probably this thing doesn't stop. And it won't just happen to just Ghana. You are going to have it probably across weaker countries. Because when it comes to, you know, bigger economies, Ghana obviously would not be one of the very, you know, strong economies of the world. So as far as I'm concerned, in that manner, yes, we should be concerned.
Michael, so oil prices have gone up. I mean, it's $105 and counting as of yesterday per barrel. And we've seen tweets from even government officials. A lot of people are saying that, yes, of course, you're going to take advantage of this to give us a reason why you should increase fuel prices. But is it justified when we're told that because of the increase in oil prices on the world market, and in fact, we're told that the Russian stock exchange also has dwindled. So will that affect us in any way in terms of our economy and the likely increase of fuel prices in the country and on the African continent?
Well, first, we live in a global village. Happenings in any part of the world has repercussions on the economy, even in the most distant countries. In 2007, what was called then as the global financial crisis was basically a group of investment bankers in the United States mismanaging their funds. However, it had rippling effects on the whole global economy, and we paid for it dearly. what people are not realizing is that Russia is a major stakeholder in the global oil and gas industry. It is the third largest producer of oil. When it comes to natural gas, it supplies basically the whole of Europe with natural gas. Then, aside that, when these international powers decide to commit to war, funds they mostly allocate for development assistance in the third world, developing countries like Ghana, Togo, Ivory Coast. They may have to rechannel these funds into their war. We just realized that the United States of America was spending over $300 million every day in Afghanistan for nearly 20 years. Imagine the impact of such funds, the investment it could have made in our part of the world where people are even struggling to eat. So whether we like it or not, the war in Ukraine, in as much as it prolongs, global oil prices are going to increase, and there are repercussions for the Ghanaian economy. If when we had our energy challenges, we brought in the Ameri car powers. They are run on fuel, and we buy this fuel from the international market, although we are also we produce our own.
And that's where the problem is, because we should be able to refine our oil so we don't have to necessarily rely on the global market too much.
Actually, we are a net importer.
We
import more than we export.
And that's the problem.
And we don't even have the means to refine oil now. Thor has been grounded for some time now. So these are challenges that are going to happen should these things happen. He talked earlier about Ghanaian students. We have over 1,000 of them. And all of them, most of them are in the medical field because of the expertise of Ukraine when it comes to medicine and other science-related courses. These people are supposed to be trained and brought back home to support our health infrastructure and system. Once the war prolongs, they are going to be in the house, and it has a whole lot of repercussions. And then, if you remember, when Russian separatists took over the Crimea region, there was a Dutch plane that was going to Malaysia. They shot it with one of their missiles, and this is also likely to disrupt the global aviation system because flights may have to be diverted, people traveling to go and bring in goods. There are a lot of ramifications that we may not see now, but in the long run we are likely to suffer. And as based on the regulations on our energy sector, especially fuel, once prices in the international market increase, the importers also increase it, and then it has rippling effects on transport fares, on market women, traders, and even the ordinary Ghanaian. When fuel prices increase in Ghana, everything else increase. So we should all hope that the war doesn't prolong, and I believe Ghana can leverage on its position as a non-permanent member or representative of the UN Security Council now to call for a ceasefire. Once that ceasefire is established between both parties, Russia and Ukraine, we have over 1,000 Ghanaian students there. If there is the need to bring them home, why not?
Well, we saw a tweet, and also from the Foreign Affairs Minister, and I'll just read if we can project what was put on her page. It was also a representation of what the Foreign Affairs Ministry had put out. It said that today the world woke up to the bombardment and invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation. Ghana condemns unreservedly this unprovoked attack on the sovereignty and territorial integrity of a United Nations member state and calls on Russia to withdraw and end the war. So they have said that, but it goes on to say that the government of Ghana is gravely concerned about the security and safety of over 1,000 students and other Ghanaians in Ukraine, and has asked them to take shelter in a place in their homes or in government places of shelter as we engage the authorities, our relevant diplomatic missions, and our honorary consul on further measures. We've heard from the NUC's president in Russia, and he's saying that, well, at this point, the airspace has been closed. We don't have any means of escaping or exiting. And so, government of Ghana, this is when you should step in and deliberate with the other neighboring countries. If it's Poland, speak to them and let's see how you can evacuate us into these countries. We're seeing other countries do it for their students. We're not seeing the same for us. What do you say?
Currently, what I know is that based on the attacks, the launch of missiles, and then it's very difficult for any airspace to operate in Ukraine now, because the likelihood of being hit by a missile is real. And then yesterday, even with images and videos that we saw, even the Ukrainian citizens are struggling to enter Poland. We saw huge vehicular traffic. So these are dangerous times. The best thing to do now, if you are living in Ukraine, is to probably find shelter in a very secure environment, so that under the condition of a ceasefire, when both parties agree that for the next 7 hours we are not going to engage in open confrontation so that the sick, the wounded, the aged, women, children, and the needy could be attended to. Based on that short period, we can make arrangements to transmit our stranded students to neighboring Poland and other neighboring countries so that they can be brought back home. And I think that should be something that should be pursued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration.
Let's just take a look at some Ghanaian students in Ukraine at the moment. They're very worried, and of course the Foreign Affairs Ministry says take shelter, and so this is it. But there are airstrikes. I mean, what happens if some of these buildings are also struck? If you're saying they should take shelter, what do they do when there's a strike that's close to them? That's what's happening. But I know you have to go, Michael, because you have to be somewhere else. And so thank you so much for speaking to us this morning. Michael Kojo Nketia is an international relations analyst, by the way. And we still have Dr. Adam Bona still in the studios with us. And I just want to find out from you, Doc, just quickly. So with regards to the issue of these students and the statement that has been released by the Foreign Affairs Ministry, they have come under a lot of criticism for how they're handling the situation of evacuation of students. Do you think that at this point, really, that was the best they could have done?
Well, we could have done better, but I must say, just as the Ukrainians themselves, the citizens of Ukraine themselves did not, take the conflict, did not believe this was going to happen. I'm sure all over the world, a lot of people and a lot of nations thought this was just mere rhetoric. It was never going to happen. That is not to make an excuse for the leadership of this country. But I think the nearest embassy, the embassy that takes care of, Ukraine, I think is in Switzerland or something. And so probably what would have to happen if our diplomats, would want to do that would be to probably hoist wherever our nationals, if they are all in one space. You hoist our flag there to signify that these are, a group of people who are Ghanaians who have no interest in the conflict. That would be another way to, identify your people, because at the moment, exit by air is
out of the question.
Impossible. Exit by road is near to impossibility. By sea, the same. So how are you going to get out? The only way is to probably seek shelter in one of those bomb shelters, or if there is a place, if there is a hall that I do believe that by now Honorable Shirley and her people would have put themselves together. I'm told we have about 1,200 Ghanaians, about 1,200 students studying in Ukraine, and so put them together in a hall somewhere if it is possible, hoist our flag there, and probably declare, if it's possible, to say that's the Ghanaian territory. We have no hand in what is going on. So if you are dropping missiles, don't drop a missile,
would it make any difference?
Well, I think it would make some difference, because then what else can the Ghanaian authority, the whole world is watching.
Yeah.
But we just can't watch. We need to take some pragmatic steps to be able to identify our people and say our people are in this studio. And therefore, if we have the Russian embassy here. We can communicate through the Russian embassy to Vladimir Putin and his people and say, Ghanaians, these days you can go on Google Map and be able to locate a building and say, in whatever you do, stop the war. But if you want to continue, or if there are certain things you want to do, can you avoid this building, because we have our nationals in this building, and we have no interest in in this conflict. That would be another way of safeguarding the safety, ensuring that our nationals are safe. And I think it is not just students. I've picked up information that there are people who are business people who have traveled there, who are stuck in their hotels, and some of these people are unaccounted for. When I say unaccounted for, they went there on their own volition to go transact business. They got there at the wrong time, and they haven't been able to get out. So as we discuss the issue of students, we need to also begin to discuss the issue of other, Ghanaians who are stuck in various hotels and motels and the rest. If there is a way, we can move all these people to a facility. Let's do that. Or else, the Ghanaian authorities can decide to hire a hotel and move all our nationals in these hotels, like I said, and identify that facility as a facility that for the time being it's a Ghanaian, because, you know, during war, you are not allowed to bomb churches, hospitals, diplomatic missions and the rest. So we can have something of a sort. Once we do that, I think that then would have been putting in place some measures to ensure our nationals are safe.
Get us into any of the European countries, and because they're European countries, we need visas before we can go into them. And so the Foreign Affairs Ministry should be up and running at this point, trying to secure visas for them as well, so they can move into any of these other countries, maybe Poland.
Well, it's possible, but that would have to be an initiative started here. Once again, Honorable Shirley Ayoko Botwe and her people should have started this already.
Yeah.
But like I said, is it just 100 or 1,200 students or 1,000 students or more? How many of them are living in Poland, in Ukraine legitimately? Because then, you know, when it comes to acquisition of visas and all that, some of these European countries sometimes think it is everything. And so probably this is the time some of these European countries will have to bend back and say, well, we'll give you some safe package, passage. But the truth is that I think there is a martial, there is state of emergency has been declared in Ukraine. So in that way, you will need a permit to be able to go. And are you sure that we'll be able to, escort them to the nearest, probably sovereign country like Poland? They have to do something.
But the majority leader, the deputy majority leader in Parliament, Honorable Afenyo-Markin, says that this is even the reason why we need the e-levy if we're talking about evacuating Ghanaians out of Ukraine. I don't know what but let me just read what he says. And I quote, "The call to evacuate Ghanaian citizens from Ukraine will come at a cost. No European country will evacuate our citizens for us. America will not do that. There's going to be pressure on the limited resources that we have." Of course, Deputy Minority Leader, you have not spoken into the microphone, but if you're talking about e-levy, this is the more important reason why we need it. If you were talking about the e-levy, that was the next point I was going to get to, that we should congregate around it and find a way of generating revenue as a country to save the situation, because we're not in normal times.
Well, this issue of e-levy is taking a political dimension. And so it is either you are for it or you are not for it. You can't be in the middle. As far as I'm concerned, if it will take the passage of e-levy to bring the 1,200 or so Ghanaians into Ghana, so be it.
But we've been told that 6.9 million would even take a year for us to recoup that amount. So how are we now going to think that within now and when we need to evacuate Ghanaians who are in Ukraine, passing the e-levy is the way to go? Well,
I wouldn't understand why Honorable Afenyo-Markin would link the passage of the e-levy law, link it to evacuation of Ghanaians, because even if the law is passed today, looking at what is happening in Ukraine, it is almost impossible to get the amount of money you need immediately to be able to bring, to move Ghanaians into safety. And so, like I said, why, unless of course government has its fingers or feet on a certain button, so that once it is passed, some colossal amount of money comes in and they are able to use some of it. But I think that my interest for now, and I believe the interest of most Ghanaians would be, how do we move our brothers and sisters who are resident or who are in Ukraine to safety? And I would have wished that the issue of e-levy would not come in, because the moment you can see the dimension this e-levy thing is taking, if you are not careful, then the safety of the Ghanaians in Ukraine becomes something partisan. It's discussed in a more partisan way, because then it's almost like you are blackmailing me to accept that e-levy must be passed to bring Ghanaians, or else, we don't bring them. But for me, I don't want to believe that is a tangent, what's the name, Afenyo-Markin took. I would have wished that the conversation to bring Ghanaians or move them to safety would not be linked to e-levy. But unfortunately, the discussion, and I would hope that in Parliament, they will try to avoid politicizing the safety of Ghanaians in Ukraine. The simple reason is that when you talk about e-levy, then it becomes politics. Everybody seems to say, well, I mean, I don't want to go into that discussion. Let's take them into safety first before anything.
Before anything. And we'll be speaking to some of these students and their student leaders in Ukraine so they can tell us firsthand exactly what it is like living there now as a Ghanaian with what is going on. But let's go back to the issue of sanctions. And yesterday, when President Joe Biden spoke, he talked about the fact that they're going to freeze Russia's assets, and they're going to even freeze the banks, about 4 banks as well, just so that will cripple them. And in the past, sanctions at least forced Russia to change its approach. So they believe that if they do that again this time around, it will change the approach, because in this case, Russia is the aggressor. Let me just read what exactly he said, and I quote. He said, Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. So they're going to do everything to cripple their economy so that they'll have to rescind their decision on embarking on this strike.
Well, the truth is that they're already there. Sanctions or no sanctions. I think, the West stood a better chance of stopping this war than allowing it to get to where it has gotten to. It doesn't matter even if they decide to go and bombard the whole of Russia. Russia has gone in, called their bluff and gone in. And the truth is that, for me, I don't believe in these sanctions and sanctions and sanctions. Sanctions are usually temporary. And who suffers? It's not Putin who is going to suffer. It's not the guys who are leading, the governance space within Russia who suffer. It's the ordinary Russian who is going to suffer. And remember, whatever sanctions they impose on Russia, we also tend to suffer. That's the thing, because then once they impose sanctions on Russia, the moment, let's say me, I'm a businessman, if I have to procure, if I had to procure from Russia, then they begin to look out for you. There was a time I had to purchase something from one of these countries. And the money got locked up in one of the New York banks because they said the money was going to leave that bank and go to a company that the American whatever the West don't support. As you see today, if you make a mistake and you fly into certain countries and they put their stamp on your passport, I don't want to mention these countries, chances are that you might never be able to travel to most of these Western countries. And so usually when these sanctions happen, it is those on the bottom of the ladder who suffers. I think that they would have to come to a negotiation table. Find out, why is Russia doing this? Russia has a reason for doing this. And so if you bring in the sanctions, would the sanctions stop them? At the moment, they've bombarded about 14 bases. And they've taken over a nuclear they've taken over it. And remember, they've also encircled, what do you call it?
Kiev?
The encircled, what's the name? Ukraine. Ukraine is encircled.
Well, yeah.
From the north to the west to the south, everywhere they've encircled them. So then, if you are going to sanction them, what then happens?
Do you think they'll move troops in? And I'm talking about NATO, because again, Joe Biden says that our forces are not going to Europe to fight in Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies and reassure those allies in the East. As I made it crystal clear, the United States will defend every inch of NATO territory with the full force of American power. NATO General Secretary as well says that we are not moving in troops, but we are supporting Ukraine with some weapons so they can fight. But do you think that eventually there'll be that need for them to move in, and what could be the consequences?
It will be a disaster. If they move in troops, knowing the might of Russia, it's going to be a disaster. So I would urge caution that instead of trying to use force to fight force, they rather, at the moment, even if you see the posture of the Ukrainian government, they are not doing boot to boot with, what do you call it? Because they don't even have most of their army was based around the separatist area. And so once they cut them off, it was easy to bombard most of their military bases and airports and the rest. So I would urge that they shouldn't try to use force to remove Russia. Because if they couldn't use force to remove the Taliban government, then I'm wondering, Taliban government that were using hunters weapons, you couldn't use force to remove them, and you go into a nuclear power space and say you are going to use force. Bella, no, it's going to be a disaster for all of us. The world economy is like, you can see the way the city is suffering among all the, and it is not because probably the economy wasn't doing well, but it is also because of what we are seeing. It's affecting every country. Fuel prices, if things don't change quickly, fuel prices could go to 10 cedis per liter, and it is me and you who will suffer. So,
but Ukraine needs that support.
Say that again?
Really, Ukraine needs that troop support, because again, if you look at statistics, it says that Ukraine has just about 200,000 men at the forefront, as against 900,000 from Russia. Russia even has 2 million reserve army men on standby to go in, as against 900,000 reserve men from Ukraine. So they will need the support, and they will need troops from NATO and from US.
Well, mine is that, like I'm saying, let me reiterate that it will be difficult for the West, the whole of the West, to use force
against Russia.
Okay. It will be a disaster for the whole world.
Okay.
Because remember, China is watching.
And
remember,
they are also in support of Russia in a way.
Thank you. China is watching. And America knows China is watching. NATO knows China is watching. And you know the bad guy, what's his name? The guy in North Korea. He's also watching. And I'm sure America knows how this game is played, because China is watching and looking at Taiwan. Right? China is watching and looking at Taiwan. The guy in North Korea is also looking at South Korea.
Yeah.
And so mine is that they've got to, because if they go in and they are not able to defeat the Russians, then you have opened the floodgate for, what's the name? Other countries who would want to
support Russia.
Not support, take over other countries who do the same, because then they know that you don't have what it takes to come and remove them. So I would want diplomacy. Diplomacy is what is needed at the moment, and I do believe that our president, he works very well with some of these people. They should all begin to speak to Putin, hoping that he would lessen the number of missiles and, probably stop what is going on.
All right. Thank you so much for speaking to us this morning. Dr. Adam Bonai is a security analyst and CEO of Security Warehouse Limited. And earlier, we spoke to Professor Vladimir Entry Danso. He's the Dean for the Ghana Armed Forces Command and Staff College. And also Michael Kwejo Nketia, an international relations expert. And we will be speaking to some students who are living in Russia at the moment. And so the Vice President of GUGS in Ukraine, in China, will speak to the NUC's president in Ukraine and a number of other ones as well. But keep watching. This is TV3Newday. A big thank you going out to Sheila Bones, who always styling me every Friday on the show. And a big happy birthday wish going out to Cookie. First of all, today is her birthday. God bless you. And also to Mr. Francis Edujan, formerly of Bank of Ghana. He turns 73 today. And I pray for good health and long life from your daughter-in-law, Brenda Dugan, and son, Maxwell Dugan. Also to Abigail Dede Hogbanyo Osabute of Ghana Civil Aviation. It's your birthday from Mausi. And to Daniel Abuaje, lighting technician at APL. Long life, prosperity, and greatness. We'll be back with a lot more. This is TV3 New Day. Keep watching.